Jesse Norman.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, and what an excellent debate it has been, and I've been very interested to follow the contributions that have been made, and they very welcome they are too. You may recall, Madam Deputy Speaker, this debate follows an urgent question that was called by the Labour Party some months ago into the state of the automotive sector, in which they were mortified to discover that actually vast numbers of investments were already underway at that time. And it's unfortunate that the honourable member opposite talks about being let down, but if let down is what this country and this economy and this industry is feeling, then why is it that there's just been an astonishing succession of investments? That doesn't speak to let down, that speaks to confidence and investment to the future. So we celebrate BMW Group's announcement on investing £600 million that will bring production of 2 all-new electric mini models and support the full transition to electric vehicle production by 2030. We welcome that, as do the Members of Parliament for Oxford, I'm pleased to say, both of them. That's very pleased to have their support, and very pleased to have the support of members across this House for that. And we welcome the investment that has been made by Stellantis in Ellesmere Port. Well, that's fantastic. I'm delighted. The member opposite welcomed it. He couldn't avoid being gloomy about that aspect of the tremendous investment that's taking place. That makes the plant the first all-EV facility in the UK and one of the first in Europe. And of course, as we heard the determination to be gloomy from the other side, we were also noticing at the same time £4 billion worth of new gigafactory investment from Tata Group. We were noticing the announcement made a couple of years ago by Nissan and Envision for £1 billion to create an EV manufacturing hub in Sunderland, £227 million in Halewood, Bentley committing £2.5 billion to make the transition in its Crewe plant to zero-emission vehicles, JLR £15 billion over 5 years into their industrial footprint towards electrification. If everything is as disastrous as the opposition suggests, how can there be this constant succession of new private sector investments? That is what the question is. Madam Deputy Speaker, the truth of the matter is that over the last 2 years, the UK's automotive sector has been boosted by over £6 billion of business investment. They will drive the transition to zero-emission vehicles with funding for manufacturing and crucial components as well, and they reflect confidence. Now, we know that this is important because cars and vans account for a huge proportion of domestic UK transport emissions. And therefore, it's important to address that. Over £2 billion has been spent to support the transition, and the government is continuing to invest. There are now over 1.2 million plug-in vehicles in the UK. That's a 45% increase over the past year. Again, Madam Deputy Speaker, that doesn't speak to decline, that speaks to rapid growth and acceleration. 58% of those vehicles are battery electric vehicles. 20% of new cars in the UK in August of 2023 were battery electric vehicles. So that is, again, a sign of confidence and a sign of growth, and rightly so. And of course, what this does is to put the UK's automotive industry at the forefront of new low-carbon technology, creating thousands of new jobs and providing certainty to manufacturers and infrastructure investors. 65% of vehicle manufacturers in the UK car market have already committed to make the transition to zero-emission cars by 2030, and all major manufacturers have committed to selling 100% zero-emission vehicles by 2035. Now, it's been several members have raised the question of the EV infrastructure rollout and charging. And of course, it's understood on all sides of this House that the rollout of electric vehicles needs to be supported by a robust, widespread public charging network. And of course, that network continues to grow. To date, the government and the industry have supported installation of over 48,000 publicly available charging devices, again, an increase of 43% over the past year, and that includes nearly 9,000 rapid devices. My honourable friend, the member for Rugby, rightly highlighted service areas, and I was delighted to hear his excellent description of the very rapid scale-up of the motorway service area at Junction 1 of the M6. I thought that was a very interesting and important intervention, and he will know that over 96% of service areas in England now have charging available, and there are hundreds of chargers across the motorway service area network. And of course, a lot of this is private investment. The Chancellor recently opened the UK's largest electrical vehicle infrastructure charging site to date in Birmingham, including 180 charging devices. Now, of course, the question has also been raised member for Meriden, member for Bath, raised a question about standards, and rightly so. As they will know, the government's investing through the local electric vehicle infrastructure fund a £381 million to deliver tens of thousands of local charge points. And of course, the Rapid Charging Fund will do the same thing to future-proof electrical capacity at strategic locations. But of course, alongside that has come the consumer regulations that we have laid, and those will ensure that pricing information and payment methods are simplified, charge points are reliable, and public charge point data is freely available, addressing many of the issues about standards and interconnection and transparency that have been raised, and rightly so. The government worked with the national disability charity Motability and the British Standards Institution in order to develop this standard, and that has made an important difference to its quality. Now, we mustn't just think about cars or even just cars and vans. Madam Deputy Speaker, we must think about heavy goods vehicles as well, and it's well understood that the UK is going to seek to make a transition here again to zero emission as part of this wider ambition. To support that, there is an HGV and infrastructure demonstrator project which will showcase zero-emission hydrogen fuel cell and battery electric HGV technology at scale in UK fleets. And the government has already tested such vehicles. These demonstrators are indeed building on the £20 million of investment made in 2021-22. I myself, in a slightly different context, was absolutely delighted to welcome the first JCB hydrogen digger, and a magnificent piece of kit that is just itself emblematic of the innovation we've seen in the sector. I think it's important also to mention, if I may, because we've touched on it, how this connects to the work we're doing in connected and automated mobility, or CAM, some £600 million of joint public and private investment placed in that sector since 2015. Yes, of course.
Can you tell me that given that at the moment, if you add a new EV to the charging system, it will be a gas fire station that has power station that has to fire it up, so it's not a net zero product. When will we be in a position to have enough renewable power so that if you add an electric car, it will be recharged with renewable power?
Well, an economist of his distinction, Madam Deputy Speaker, will know that it's futile to predict the activity of private markets because they so often move faster than you would imagine. A classic example of this has been in the way in which electrification has moved up the range and the weight curve over the last few years. It's certainly true that electric vehicles rely for part of the charge at the moment on fossil fuels, and that does mean that they are less green than they will be when that fossil fuel is removed from our electrical charging system. They nevertheless remain significantly lower emission over the life cycle, including the production and the disposition of batteries, than their equivalent petrol and diesel vehicles. Madam Deputy Speaker, let me say that capacity building projects for important areas of our connected autonomous vehicle supply chain are already starting to take place, and this country remains one of the first to explore the business case for connected autonomous mobility as a mass transit solution. This connected autonomous mobility is going to be a future. It will be an electric future, it will be a zero-emission future, and it is one that is being powered by investments and leadership being provided now with the private sector by this government.